really important to understand how much we have to tell kids about their journey, their person's journey and what's going on. Now, sometimes we don't get that luxury. Sometimes people die very unexpectedly and we don't get to prep ourselves or our kids. But in my case, with an illness, people could have prepped me. People could have prepped my brother, and no one did. And I still think about that to this day, and it still is something I wrestle with because I feel like I didn't get that chance to process that myself and say goodbye in such a way where I would have taken more time, right? So shortly after that, my dad went to hospice, like the story goes, and we actually had a really amazing experience with a music therapist, which, if you're unfamiliar with music therapists or art therapists, they are amazing human beings with talents beyond the typical counselor, but they use art and music to help you process your feelings and just be understood in a different way. And so for my brother and I, we wrote a song about my dad's cancer and how much we hated it, and how we felt about it, and stupid cancer and all the things. And we played drums and guitars, not very well, and they recorded it. They had an amazing music studio in this hospice. It was amazing. Anyway, so they recorded it and put it on a CD, and we walked down to his room and we played it for him. And I still remember this, still have the CD, still listen to it from time to time, makes me cry, but he was completely unconscious before we came in. But when we played the video, he didn't wake up, of course, but he moved, right? He moved, and you could tell that he's making more movements than before. And that was just something that we, of course, told ourselves that, he got to hear the song. He knew we were okay. He knew that we got to share that with him, and that was really special. So after that, of course, we left. He died that night. But what was amazing was that opportunity, that hospice took the time to do that with us, to give us that special gift, because it was a gift and something that stays with us forever now. So I remember the next day, my mom sitting my brother and I down in a really great environment. I have to give my mom credit. She did a good job with, sitting us down quietly, and just her and I and my brother, and telling us that our dad had died, and truly using those words, your dad died. So there was no confusion, right? No expired or passed away, my two least favorite. She told us the truth, right? But again, I wasn't prepared. I still was thinking, like, Dad's gonna be okay. I'm gonna keep praying tonight. I'm gonna pray really hard, and it's gonna be okay. And of course that didn't happen, and that's not how it works. But that started my grief journey. My grief journey started that day he went to hospice, when I realized he's gonna die. And then after that, I joined a grief center, just like Blue Butterfly, and got grief counseling from our hospice there. But it was life-changing, that part, right? So you have this life-changing tragedy of your parent dying or your special person dying, and then you have the healing that begins. And so the healing part of the story is just as important as the sad tragedy part, because that's where we start moving forward, and that's where we start finding purpose in our life. And I found my purpose by first going to Hearts and Hope, which was the center where I grew up in West Palm Beach, and volunteers, like many of the ones we have at Blue Butterfly, just cared so much about me. I remember walking in every time, and we did a potluck dinner, so I'd be bringing my fried chicken in, and they'd be like, Danielle, how was your day at school? They were just so happy to see you. And like, my mom could have been having the worst day ever and probably, didn't really want to talk much, but then you get there and you see that volunteer who's like, just so glad you exist, right? And that's what we try to do with our kids, because we want them to know that they matter and that we're so glad they exist and that they're here. And so then I would go to this center and I would do activities. I almost brought some today. I still have my memory box that I made. Do you have yours? I still have it, and I look at it from time to time because I want to be reminded of what was I remembering back then when 10-year-old Danielle was missing her dad, right? What did I put in there? I even made a little lock, like out of paper, because no one could go in. But it was those things that I remember that I brought to Blue Butterfly, right? I tell my team this all the time, that whatever I remember from when I was 10 is what we're gonna do, because clearly it made an impact. And like, for instance, the teddy bear library, right? It's one of my favorite things. I remember walking into my center and just looking around at all of these bears, and they were like, you get to pick one. And I thought, why? Like, me? I get to have one? How cool. But I still had that bear for like 15 years. because it just meant so much to me of like the healing and that journey. It was a symbol, right? And it is for many of our kids, it's a comfort measure. And of course, the volunteer component is so huge because you have that buddy, you have someone who cares enough to ask you about your person and how they died and who they were and all of that. And all of that really makes a huge difference, which is why we see it here and you'll see it here. So my story is not really unique. Many of us have the same story. Many of us have a similar situation, but the key takeaways that I always like to talk about are that kids remember. They remember the smell and the sounds and the sights. And you can't take that away from them, no matter how many times you tell them, don't think about that. It wasn't your fault. It can't be your fault. They're always going to think about that. I mean, how did my dad get thyroid cancer, right? No one knows. I had a teen tell me once, I gave my cousin cancer, and I said, why do you think that? And she said, because you don't know how we get cancer, do you? So she believed it. And it's true, when you're 10 years old or younger, you might think that you gave this to your person, or maybe you stressed out your loved one so much that they had a heart attack. Like, there's nothing you can say that's gonna take that pain away from a kiddo, right? Because that's what they think. We just learn over time that that's not how things work, right? So if we keep going on the slides, we're gonna talk a little bit about children and the things they go through, right? So you understand that grief is the internal distress we have after someone dies. So this is the pain we feel inside, all the feelings that come after someone has died. And I didn't even list all of them, because how can you, right? For me, today might be a sad day, and for you, it might be a happy one, and that's okay. You know, holidays are tough. And in honor of Children's Grief Awareness, we're here in November, which is coming up with Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is tough because it's a time of year where most people are thankful, and if you're grieving, you're not, right? You're not thankful, because thankful would be my special person here with me. So we just try to remember that. Grief comes all the time and it never leaves, right? 20 years ago, my dad died and I'm still talking about it. You know, and that doesn't mean that I haven't made peace with the fact that he's not coming back, but it means that he's so important to me, that I loved him so much that I grieve him. And the same goes for our kids, right? So when they're in school or they're at a sporting event and randomly you see them burst into tears or they have a big feeling, could be their grief, and that's completely normal. Normal grief doesn't require therapy, but it really can be benefited by some support, some love, some hugs, some opportunity to share and be heard, right? Instead of being told, don't feel like that, put those feelings away, they don't belong here. And grief can be lifelong. We know that. Grief looks like so many different things. I think people forget that it's okay to have laughter and joy when you're grieving. And I can't tell you how many times people have judged a family like this for laughter and joy when they're grieving, or you find an opportunity for moving forward and a new adventure, and your laughter and your joy is there, and people are wondering if you still miss that person. Of course you do, right? And there are more feelings, we'll see. So we have memorializing is a really important opportunity for grief. When you are honoring your person that has died, finding a way to memorialize them is huge. Here's just one example of doing a candle memorial, but you could plant a tree, right? You could paint a mural. There are so many different things. Whatever speaks to you and your family, that's what we recommend. But the idea is that they're always with you, and we want to keep their memory alive. So there are a few important things that should be mentioned when we're thinking about grief and how will grief affect kids. The age of the kid really matters, and their developmental ability to understand and process matters. Because if a child is a newborn baby, right, they may feel grief from their adults around them, but they may not be able to verbalize their grief, right? But if we're talking about a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, you're gonna see different things. And you might see different experiences in sibling groups, right? One sibling is handling it really well and one is on fire. And that is completely normal. And it also depends on the person who died, their age too, right? How long did you get with that person? So I only got 10 years with my dad, and my brother only got 6, right? And then the other people in our family had many more years with him. So the type of death can be a really important part of the grief process. So how did this person die, right? For my story, I was able to have that goodbye moment, and many people don't. And that really can affect how people can process their grief. It can be a part that they're kind of hung up on, right? Like, I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to be a part of that decision. We hear from kids in our program, they didn't get to be a part of the taking this person off life support decision, and they felt like they should be. Whereas the adult thinks they're kids, they shouldn't be a part of that. But the child still holds on to that, and it's part of their grief healing now that they have to work on. The relationship is so important. Was it a good one, a bad one? Was it complicated? Did they live out of state? That's gonna affect grief and how we heal and how we understand. Support system. Does your child have a support system? Do you, as the grieving child or teen, have a support system? Do you have people you can talk to about your grief? All of that matters. The health of the person who died, the health of you and the people around you, and the story. One of the most important things is that you tell children the truth, the age-appropriate truth. And over time, they may get more information from the story that you weren't able to tell them at the beginning. But we always are gonna recommend that you tell them the truth. So I like to go over a few numbers just to hit it home as to why we even care about grieving children, why we have Blue Butterfly, why does this day exist nationally? And it's because in Florida, 1 in 12 children will experience the death of a parent or sibling by the time they turn 18. So in a typical classroom, that could be 2 kids. Now, we're gonna see on the next slide, hopefully, the breakdown of the kids by county. There is a slide of the breakdown of the kids by county, but the most important thing is that we cover 4 counties, right? So when we're looking at numbers, we're looking at Charlotte and DeSoto and Sarasota and Manatee County and trying to see how many kids are grieving. And the numbers that we have only actually are looking at parent deaths. So when we think about sibling deaths and grandparent deaths and cousins and aunts and uncles, there are so many kids, thousands of kids affected by grief every day. And we're only scratching the surface. We serve about 200 a year, which feels like a lot, but not when you have thousands that truly need our help and our support. So I'm gonna pause because PowerPoint isn't on track, and I'm gonna let Spencer tell a little bit about his story and who his special person is.
Yeah, so my special person is my dad. He was one of the nicest people I know. He owned a small business, loved cars. He would always be working in the garage, restoring them, and he also restored some old Vespas, little motorcycles, and the picture that I'm pretty sure is somewhere in there is a picture of us when we actually won one of the competitions that we brought one of his Vespas to. And so that was a really special moment for me, and he was always there for me, and yeah, I love him to pieces.
Now, how old were you, Spencer, when your dad died?
So I was 12. It was around 4th quarter, 6th grade. So it was April 2nd, 2018. So it's been a couple years, but not as long as some people.
And can you tell us a little bit about how your dad died?
Yeah, so he died unexpectedly due to an aneurysm. It was one day when I was homesick because I was suffering with a migraine at the time, and I was taking a shower, and then randomly my mom just yelled in the shower, "We're going to the hospital." And I'm just very confused at that point. I just have a really bad headache, and I'm just don't know what's going on. And then she's like, "I'll explain in the car." So we got in the car, and then she was just like, at the time we were told that he had a stroke. And so she said, "Oh, your dad had a stroke. We're going to the hospital to see what's going on." And then we get to the hospital, and then we're just sitting in the waiting room because they won't let us go back to see him because a lot was going on and they were trying to help him. And we were sitting there for about an hour and a half, and my grandma, her dog was a grief support, not necessarily a grief support dog, but it was a therapy dog, and they were in the hospital that we were at just doing the normal therapy stuff. So her and the dog came down and were sitting with us in the waiting room Then after about an hour, I could be wrong with the time, I don't really know, it was a lot going on. They brought us into the back and we're just like, your father passed away. And then it was just a shock out of nowhere. There was nothing to be anticipated. He ran almost every day. Pretty sure a month before competing in his first marathon, he was super healthy, and it was devastating to say the least.
And you've talked about before that moment in the hospital when they shared with you that your dad died, and then following up to give you the blue butterfly info.
Yeah, so basically, first when they told us that he died, it was me, my mom, my sister, who was visiting from college at the time. It was during her spring break, and my grandma. We were sitting in the room, and then I just remember immediately I was in shock because I just didn't know what was happening. So I found like a little crack in the wall, and I was just staring at that for around like 10 minutes without saying anything. It was big shock, and then eventually we left the hospital, and while we were walking to my grandma's car, because obviously she wasn't going to let my mom drive, one of the nurses ran out and handed us a pamphlet and was like, oh, there's this new program that's starting tonight, obviously assuming you're not going to go tonight, and it was the Blue Butterfly program. And so we went to the second ever meeting that was 2 weeks later.
And I know you like to brag about that a little bit.
Yeah, I wasn't at the first one, but I was at the second one, so.
Spencer's a proud attendee, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about what Blue Butterfly was like for you and how it helped?
Yeah, so Blue Butterfly it helped me beyond like what I can even explain. It basically, I guess I'll just run through the very first thing. A couple days before I was supposed to go, Ken came over to my house and checked in to see like how I was doing, make sure I was basically good to go to be able to go and talk with the other kids. So I went there, and I remember when I first walked in, there was like one kid that I recognized from school that was like a year older than me that I had absolutely no clue he was going through anything similar. And then, as you could tell, I'm not really a shy kid, so I immediately started walking up and talking to people. But it was just, I don't want to say cool, but it was nice to see all of the other kids that were going through similar things. Obviously, I don't want this to happen to anyone, but it was good to know there were other people that were in a similar situation to me.
And there was a time where we were talking about the Blue Butterfly name and if you liked it, and you had said something about the Blue Butterfly effect. Do you remember?
Yeah, well, initially during that day we watched this movie called The Butterfly Effect in English class, and they were talking about how, like, with the butterfly effect, how everything has changed from just one small action, and I just kind of thought of it as, like, when someone goes through grief or goes to the Blue Butterfly program, it's a ripple effect. It's every single moment in your life has changed from there on. I hate to say it, but nothing's gonna be the same. And I just thought the butterfly worked, and Blue Butterfly just sounded cool, so yeah.
The butterfly effect. We still have it written on our wall in the teen room because of Spencer, so very cool. And can you just talk a little bit about some of the peers that you kind of connected with over the years and how that is helpful?
Yeah, it was amazing because there was some kids that at one point there was like 6 kids in my grade that were like at my school that were there, and there was only one of them that I knew outside of it, that like outside of group, that actually were going through anything. So it was nice to, even if we just like made eye contact in school, it was like we knew that we were going through similar things. And I still talk with some of the people I met every single day. During 2020 and the whole pandemic, we were online. One of the kids that was on Zoom, I was like texting with her, and then I sent a picture of a water main that exploded in my neighborhood, and then she was like, oh my god, a water main exploded in my neighborhood, and then found out that we were neighbors and didn't even know about it. So that was fun. And then also it was kind of cool seeing how the journey of some of the kids, because I still remember distinctly that there was this one girl that her twin brother passed away, and when she came to the meeting for the first time, it was her parents kind of forced her to go. She didn't really want to, and I remember she had like a red hoodie and was like basically hiding in it. Like, she wasn't responding to anything and didn't say anything the whole time. And then after a couple months, she started to talk, and then now she's in the FAU honors program trying to become a grief therapist. And it's just really cool meeting all the people and seeing all this and hearing all the stories.
I think we can tell from Spencer that he has found grief support very helpful, but also the peer support very helpful. And now you're kind of trying to bring that to your school.
Yeah, so it's, to be honest, the school system doesn't really deal with grief super well because a lot of teachers don't really know how to deal with it because every situation is unique and it's hard to account for that, but you do have to account for that. So it's, hopefully the schools can adjust some of their protocol to help.
To offer more support for teens and kids. Awesome. Any last minute thoughts you'd like to share?
If you are thinking about giving money to help the program, I highly recommend you do because it can help even more kids. And I still remember another thing that was really great when I first started was every Christmas, and for me Hanukkah, I'm Jewish, they had this thing where they just gave you a bunch of presents. And it was like, I wasn't even expecting it because this was 6 or 7 months after what just happened. Like, I wasn't really thinking about gifts and that kind of thing. And it was just the little toy that I got. I still have from it, what was it? It was, I don't know what it's called, but it's like this little like toy thing. It's not a transformer, but it's like something similar. And I still have it on the shelf in my room that I remember I got from the first holiday party. Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing about that. That is one of the cool things we get to do thanks to our Tidewell Foundation, who sponsors all of our programming because it's free for families, which is a huge blessing. But we do get to give gifts to all of the kids and families to help them get through the holidays because we know it's super hard and it's not fun to be grieving.
Yeah, another thing with me is that my dad passed away during one of the Jewish holidays, so that's another thing that is very hard when it comes to the different holidays. And
Can you leave us with any last minute thoughts on if a teen or child is thinking about coming but a little nervous, how would you encourage them to come?
You should come, not because you want to, but because even you just being there helps other people. The program helped me a ton, but honestly, my favorite part of the program was, as I said earlier, seeing the other kids open up and them getting the help that they need. And even you just showing up, that helps everyone around you.
And that's so true because instead of having a room of 1 where you feel alone, you have a room of 10 where you feel like you're heard and people get it, right?
And it also helps the people around you at home because I know even just my mom seeing me that, in my case, I was fully willing and wanting to go to it, but I know with my mom, just seeing that I wanted to go made her day.
And I'll just share a little bit about the caregiver component that we offer. So we really feel like it's important that the adults get the support that they need as well. So we do a support group for the adults while the teens and the kids are in their group so that the adults can talk about their person that has died, but also learn some ways to support their kids. And I think that really is an important part of the process. And both Spencer and his mom are now ambassadors in our program. So they have graduated and now use their tools that they've learned to help us and help other new families, right?
Yep.
Thank you, Spencer. Does anybody have a question for Spencer? And he can use the iPass rule if he needs to, but does anybody want to ask anything?
I have a question. So what is something we were talking about the way the school system deals with, the death of someone close to a child. What was something that was least helpful that, like a teacher or administrator said to you, and what's something that was most helpful?
I guess I'll just say, again, every situation is unique, but in my situation, I'm a very social person. Like, I thrive on having a social life, and what we decided to do was just have everyone know. I don't necessarily think the way they handled it was the best. So the way that my grade found out, which I go to a school that, it's a public school, but it's a relatively small one. It's like about 200 kids per grade, was they just had all the math teachers just tell everyone. And so that was an interesting experience when, like, one thing that did was, like, I remember my Spanish teacher in my class, like, wrote me a card, which I thought that was nice. but also I get how for some people that would be awful, because it would be like just living proof that everyone's like knows about what's happening, which I mean for me that was a good thing, but it's, again, every case is unique. And another thing that I thought that I really liked is in Jewish tradition there's a thing called a shiva, where it's everyone after the funeral kind of goes back to someone's house that's hosting it. And I remember at the time I was in 6th grade, and my 5th grade math teacher came to it, and I just remember that was really special to me.
Sometimes we have to help tell our support systems, like our schools, our churches, our coaches, what our kids need, right? And so maybe with Spencer, it wasn't awesome that all of the math teachers shared that, right? Can you think of a way you wish it would have happened better?
Yeah, I wish it was either like, even if it's just like the guidance counselor that said it, or just someone that was a little more personal than just kind of like the math teachers. And it was like, even the 2 math teachers that I didn't have were also told to give it. So it was like, I never met these people before. Like, it just felt a little weird with them kind of talking about my situation. And it was also just interesting when I was getting texts from people. It was like some that I've like never even talked to. And it was an interesting situation that probably could have been handled better if it was. I still agree that in my position it was good to just have everyone know, but if it was just given in a more personal way.
And that's a good segue to Miss Lendy was going to share a little bit of the comfortable and uncomfortable things that have been said to kids and adults over the years. Basically what we ask our groups are, what were some of the things that were helpful that people said, and what were some of the things that were unhelpful that people said. So can you share and speak up for everyone to hear?
Oh, I'm loud, that's not a problem. We'll be fine. So we'll start with what some of the families put down as comforting, since that's the one closest to me. We had one kid that said that their theater school brought food for their family for 2 whole weeks, so it took the pressure off mom having to cook for them, so that was helpful. That it meant a lot to them that just kind of people they weren't expecting called and checked in on them. Spending time with them without asking too many questions was a big one. Just people simply being there, being close to them while crying, sending quick texts, and just not asking how they're doing. That was a big one for a lot of them. Talk positive about the steps that they've made so far. Again, that just checking in, being present, and then of course positive messages about their person. Just hearing how their person impacted other people around them were all very comforting to these kids and adults. The uncomfortable, so the first one is apparently someone asked a child, "Is that why your dad left you?" Boo. Another one, "I know how you feel." No, it's not the same. A medical professional telling them we did everything we could, but the child's response was, "No, you didn't save them." And this one I always find interesting because some people find it comfortable, some find it very uncomfortable, which is, "I'm sorry for your loss." And that is one that that's like the default that we all say, but it's not always comforting to people. It's not always at all. This one, actually, I teared up a bit when I read it. A kid walked up and said, "Knock, knock, who's there?" "Not your dad." My heart, that's awful. Another one, "I know how it feels, my dog died." Not kind of not the same. Someone telling the child that they're using their losses as an excuse. There was one child that said someone just gave them candy and told them to feel better. And then of course the others that we tend to say a lot. "He's in a better place. He's watching over you. He's an angel now." No, I don't want any of that. I don't want any of that. Another one is one child said that they didn't get told right away that there was some time. And a lot of times we think as adults we're protecting them as long as possible from this horrible pain, but children don't perceive it that way. They don't perceive it that way at all. There's a mom who said that someone actually asked her, "Did your husband have life insurance? How are you surviving financially?" Like that's any of their business, right? And then of course this one, which Danielle gets hung up on, this one, the "at least," or the "just be happy with the time that you got. At least you got the holidays, at least." No, none of that is comforting. And last but certainly not least, from one of our COVID families, was just being told, "Oh, come on, COVID isn't real." And she's like, "But my husband died from it, so it is real, So, yeah, those kind of make you, make you hurt.
Lots of uncomfortable things were said. Do you have any that were mentioned to you?
Yeah, my personal favorite, I don't know if favorite's the right word, but the one that my mom and I always joke about is that when people are like, oh, how are you doing? And we're not doing good. Like, my dad's dead. Like, so we always just say functioning. Because we're functioning, we're doing everything, but I mean, we're not doing good. We're like, if they're like, oh, are you okay? It's like, no, but like,
Do you really want me to say no when someone
right,
asks?
right. It's like these, then I feel like I have to like then explain why I'm not, especially if it's like someone that I don't really know. So it's like, just use the default answer, like, oh yeah, I'm doing okay. Because it's like, there's a lot of people that it's like, unless I'm super close to them, it's like, I don't want to talk to them about all of it. It's like, yeah.
That reminds me of some of our do's and don'ts, which is in here, maybe we can find them. But just to leave you with, before we end, some do's and don'ts. You know, there are so many things we can take away from hearing Spencer and hearing my story and just working with grieving kids. There are so many do's that we want you to do when you're working with, there's Spencer's dad. There we go, we found it.
That was from the car show that we were at when we got first place from a Vespa that my dad restored that he built in a sidecar so we could go on joyrides.
Aww.
That was fun.
Cool, I'm glad we found that. What was your dad's name?
His name's Sandy.
Good, thank you.
You look just like him.
Yeah, you do look like him. Okay, so somewhere is the do's and don'ts, but I know them, so I will tell you what they are. But so some of the do's that I really want to leave you with are, you know, really it's important to validate our kids. Their feelings need to be heard. And we often hear that when kids bring big feelings to some adults, that the adult feels like they have to fix it. And they have to make that feeling go away. But really, that's not what our job is. Nobody's job is really to fix a child's feelings. It's truly just to validate and hear them. And maybe help them find a way to move them around, right? Maybe we need to do a happy dance or a mad dance or an air jump up and down, wave your hands in the air, whatever you have to do. But the feelings do need to move. But we also need to validate them, right? So when a child comes to you with these big feelings, it's not about, oh, it's okay, you know, you shouldn't feel like that right now. Let's go back to class, or let's go do this, let's go read this book. No, let's honor and validate those feelings and let them be heard. You know, we do want to encourage children to share about their person that has died. We want that memory to live on. Anytime you can invite a child to share with you about their person, you know, what was their favorite food? What was their favorite thing to do? Like, it's amazing. It makes you just smile big. That person gets so excited that they get to talk about their special person. So that's a really important do. We do want to provide space for kids to come and feel safe, whether that's at a Blue Butterfly or at a school or at a counseling office, wherever. We do want kids to feel safe so that they can talk, because we know that getting grief support and finding a way to talk about your feelings can prevent things like suicidal ideations or self-harm or incarceration or drug use or abuse. So we want kids to have that safe space to do that. Would you add any more do's, Spencer?
Yeah, probably my personal favorite is just not even like when you're, especially when it comes to other kids, just being like, I'm here if you need to talk, if you need to rant, or if you just want to be on a FaceTime call in silence, that's cool too. That's something that I've used with other people, and other people have used when I was the peak of mine, even though at the time I didn't have a phone, but that's besides the point. But it's just saying that you'll be there for them. Or even a lot of times, even if you're like, I'll be there if you want, and if they don't respond, I'll still just be there. And as long as they don't say no, if they say no, then just give them their space. But if they don't say no, then even just like sitting 10 yards away, that's still better than nothing.
I like those. Those are good. And some don'ts. Be thinking about your don'ts while I share some of mine. So my favorite don't is, you know, we don't want to stop people from crying or expressing their feelings. So we don't want to hand crying people a tissue. We don't want to isolate kids by doing special Father's Day or Mother's Day projects or activities. it really is sending a bad message to these children who are grieving. And then you think about all the children who have different family situations, different family dynamics. Maybe their family doesn't have a dad or doesn't have a mom. We don't want to separate them and isolate them. So we really don't recommend that. We also don't recommend using many of the phrases that Miss Lendy was sharing earlier, like at least you can have more children. No. At least you can get another dad. Someone said that to me once, and I'm like, how do I do that? At least, all those things. And we don't want to say things like, it could be worse. Really, how could it be worse exactly? Or it's okay. What we have found is that most people, when a grief death happens, there's a million terrible things that follow it, and so nothing is truly okay. Kind of like what Spencer was saying earlier. What are some of your don'ts?
My biggest don't is don't worry, it's going to be okay. Because first of all, it's not going to be okay. Second of all, obviously I'm going to worry because, especially in my case, when it was completely sudden and there was no forewarning, I mean, that could happen to anyone. Like, I'm going to worry about, like, my mom, my sister, everyone around me. And I know a lot of people try to say it to kind of calm you down, but it honestly doesn't. And it's like, honestly, when it first happened, I know this is going to sound really funny, but the only thing that was actually able to calm me down was when I watched on my Wii U gamepad the show Hell's Kitchen. I don't know why that was the show that helped me calm down, but everyone has their own thing that just kind of helped. I mean, I don't know why Gordon Ramsay's like yelling. I don't know. That's just the show that I watched, and it really helped me like calm me down and kind of center me back. And everyone has their own thing, and I just don't try to force anything onto someone.
And I know some of the don'ts regarding, don't pretend like you know how I feel, right? Don't pretend like your loss is my loss, because they're different. They're all very different. So we're all entitled to have our feelings, but we don't have to have the same thing.
Yeah, even if it's about the same loss, like between siblings, could be completely different, but also, even if, let's say your dog died at some point and you're finding someone whose parent died, don't say that like, oh, I get what you're feeling, because no, even someone who has also experienced grief doesn't get what you're feeling. And, but even just keep that in the back of your mind, that you did lose a pet, and like, not trying to invalidate that, but just remember that with a person that's so close, that's almost 10 times the value. And even if you learned 1/10 of the experience, use that knowledge that you learned to help the other person. Because yes, it's nowhere even close to a person, but it is something, and we're not trying to invalidate that.
Well said. Pets still matter, but yes, important. Thank you. Okay, so we are I'm just going to wrap up by sharing a little bit about Blue Butterfly and how you can find us if you need us. But we are here in the community. We have 4 locations. Our main location is in Lakewood Ranch, and we have a second location in Ellington, both centers that Empath Health owns and operates, which is wonderful because families can come at any time to receive support there. And the other 2 that we have are in Newtown and Port Charlotte, and those are at churches. So we pack up our activity supplies, bring that over to the church, and set up a group space there. So all of our locations are accepting enrollment at this time. We'll be enrolling for our groups that will start up in February. So if you or your family want to learn more about Blue Butterfly, you can reach out to us, and we would be happy to talk to you about it. And we found the do's and the don'ts. Thank you. Okay, so if you want to volunteer with us, like our lovely volunteer Bryn, who set up this event for us here at Bookstore One, thank you. You can contact us, and we would love to connect with you. We need volunteers to help support us in our groups, and we are always looking for lovely friends to join us. Do you have any last minute things you'd like to say, Spencer?
Just take into account what everyone's feeling, because even if it's not grief, everyone's going through their own struggles, and there's always something you can do to help. Sometimes your ability to help is not doing anything. It's for some people, that's just what they need. So just remember, a lot of times if you're doing nothing, there is still a way you can help.
I would like a round of applause for Spencer because it's hugely brave to share and be here, so thank you. And then again, just a big thank you to Bookstore One for hosting us today. And again, in honor of Children's Grief Awareness Day, we invite you to support grieving children, wear your blue, and just reach out if we can help you. Thank you so much.
Another question. Were there any books that helped you through that process?
Good question. Bryn's asking if there are any books that can help.
That was kind of the time when I got absorbed into Harry Potter, so
Yeah.
I kind of went deep in that. But personally, I'm basically, besides, if it's not fiction, I don't really read it, to be honest. But I do know a book that helped a lot of people was, pretty sure his name was Tito, wrote a book about his experiences, one of the former volunteers. And I know like a couple of us that kind of tested it to kind of see how we felt about it, and I know that book has helped a lot of people.
Cool. And then we also have Danielle, if you want to mention any of those
Yes,
books.
so we do have some of our favorite books over here at the bookstore that Blue Butterfly uses quite a bit in their center. So if somebody is looking for a book for support for their kids on feelings or grief, we have some here at Bookstore One that you can access. And if you'd like to donate one to Blue Butterfly, you can purchase it here at the bookstore for us. Thank you so much.